Hi, I'm Alan Smith. You know, I've always been fascinated by the creative process, whether it's gardening or other artistic endeavors. You know, I think artists have always been inspired by nature, but then again, haven't we all? Take example, this picturesque setting. It could be a painting in itself, a beautiful house set afloat in a sea of lavender. To me, as a gardener and an artist, I've always been aware of that connection between these creative pursuits. So in this show, we're going to explore the connections between art and gardening. The two draw from the elements of design. Texture, line, color, all play a role. And of course, everything depends on the material you choose to work with. To help illustrate those similarities, we're going to visit with several wonderfully talented artists whose works are inspired by nature and gardening. From the Plein-Aire outdoor painters to the most meticulous botanical artists, we'll gather insight into the artist's world. And I'll even try my hand at a little oil painting. Finally, I'll put some design techniques to work using color, form, and texture as I show you how to create a beautiful and long-lasting summer container. So don't go away. When I'm designing a garden, I like to look at that space in much the same way an artist looks at a blank canvas. But you know, whether it's an expansive landscape or I'm focusing on an individual plant, I always like to draw my inspiration from Mother Nature. And that's exactly what a botanical artist does. Let me introduce you to Kate Nessler. Kate is a botanical artist who paints plants as a way to document botanical species, which means she's operating with the precision of a scientist, the passion of an artist, and with the heart of a gardener. So Kate, what are we looking for today?
Well, I'm working on a commission piece, and one of the pieces in it it's a woodland scene, is the common blue violet.
Right.
And I knew it was going to go in here. I've kind of scoped out where to find them, and this is a really pretty spot in the woods that's in that natural location, so I can dig it up and bring it in to start painting it.
So you are inspired by nature.
Oh yeah, I mean that's really that's the cause of all the paintings. That's the root or the core of all the paintings.
So here's where you get down to the serious work.
Yeah, this is where it really, the second part of where it starts. Because I have an existing composition that I want to fit this into, and I've been waiting for the violets to come up, I need to place it in the composition and get it out of this big bowl.
I see.
Okay, so I'll put this into what I know is an existing spot where it needs to be and place it as carefully as possible.
Kate, you really are documenting these objects, both individually and as the way they relate to one another.
Oh yeah, as a botanical artist, it's a science, and so it's not up to us to change nature. It's up to us just to go out there, see what we see, and if it's something beautiful or something that we want to place on paper, then we bring it back to the studio. I take away more than I add, because you don't want an excess of information. And this one started a little bit differently. Because this is a commission for the Morton Arboretum, we wanted to know what it was going to be beforehand, or at least I have some idea, and the thought that I wanted was I wanted to show the cycle of life.
So what we see here in the end will be from compost to life with bloom.
Yeah, exactly.
And the flower being the promise of the next generation.
Absolutely, and of more things to come. And what will also be in here is a new oak tree.
So from the rough sketch, Kate, where do we go from here?
Well, at that point I kind of know what I want it to be, and I have to find it.
How did you get into botanical art?
I didn't know I got into it, really. I was, have always painted or drawn even since I was a kid, and when we moved down here, wanted to spend more time painting and drawing, and I was doing everything. I was doing still lifes, I was doing my cat, I was doing barns, I was doing flowers, and didn't really realize it, but I was drawing and working all the time, and so it was really a natural progression. And I guess I was at a stage where I was doing about half flowers and half other things, and they were botanically accurate, I just didn't know it. And I was at a show and a judge told me what I was doing.
You have some more to do on the violet.
Yeah, I do.
I'd love to see this transformation and process.
I'd love
Would
to.
you? Great, wonderful.
Why don't you grab my chair and I'll get myself set up here. I guess one thing I like about this field is that it does have very strong classic background. It's built on a very strong foundation, and that foundation has really remained unchanged. It's just that what has changed, I think, are the styles that we work in. As with every other art form, it comes into the present with new materials or new viewpoints. So that changes always, but the basic core of botanical art has remained the same.
Kate's paintings serve as a way to share and to accurately record the beauty of nature. If you'd like more information on Kate and her work, just check out our website. That's pallensmith.com. Next, we'll visit the garden sanctuary of another artist, then see how these wooden works of art come to life. A great joy for me as a designer is to revisit gardens I've helped create. One in particular is the garden of Kathy Worthen, a unique artist with a Tibetan flair. Kathy wanted a quiet, introspective space to complement this beautiful Victorian home and create her works of art. I'm happy to see things have really blossomed since my last visit. The way the garden now works is it's a series of garden rooms which are an extension of the house.
That's right, that's correct. And it's nice when you have parties outside at night, and you can use the downstairs of the house, and then you can walk out onto the porch, or you can walk out into the garden. And with the furniture in the garden, it feels like you're walking into another room. It's just an open air room. It's really nice when the weather outside is just perfect, especially in the spring and the fall. And I just don't want to work inside anymore. I can bring everything outside. I can sit with nature, with animals, with even the sound of the traffic. And I work a lot alone, so it's really nice to come out. I can watch people walk by. And the other thing is that I read a lot, and so this is a perfect place to come and just sit and study some of my books. I study a lot about Tibetan art, and to be able to sit for hours and study and not be bothered.
Kathy, thank you so much for the walk around the garden.
You're welcome.
It's just a knockout.
Well, thank you.
Whenever I'm designing elements for my garden, I always keep in mind that the more natural they are, the better they seem to fit in. And that's exactly what I did when I created this rustic trellis. But others have taken this idea a step further. Jim Long, author of the book Making Bentwood Arbors and Trellises, explains how to create these artistic garden ornaments.
I find that lots of people can't identify wood, So my rule of thumb is if it bends, use it. And one of the nice things about this project is you don't really have to do very much measuring. And the first step is to attach a cross piece. And all I'm going to do is nail through the top piece into the bottom. What I do is kind of establish the arch that looks about the right proportion. There's no measurement again.
Right.
Match it with this piece, and I like to twist one around the other so it kind of helps hold it in place.
Sure.
So this is our basic trellis shape. All of my trellises are built on this foundation.
Now you make these in all different sizes.
Yes, the same design works well for big trellises 8 feet tall or little trellises that are for desktop planters.
Yeah,
These are made
for
of
the house plant.
weeping willow. If you cut these in the wintertime and make the trellis and put it in your house plant or a desktop plant, they usually root and grow.
Jim, you've been creating these for years. What is the most challenging project you've ever taken on?
Well, actually the little trellises are harder than the big trellises, but the most challenging would be the entry seat that I have here that I made of driftwood. And after working on that and accomplishing it, I worked on the gazebo in the middle of the garden, and that's probably the biggest project.
As you can see, these rustic trellises and arbors can create visual interest simply standing alone in the garden, or they can be useful supports to plants like this vigorous climbing rose. If you'd like more information on how to make interesting trellises and arbors, just check out our website. That's pallensmith.com. Coming up, we'll visit a California couple who's taken a cue from the Impressionists, and we'll learn how gardening and nature inspire them. Designing a beautiful garden can be a challenging experience, to say the least. When you think of everything you have to consider, such as light and soil conditions, as well as where to place paths, walks, and terraces, not to mention the plants themselves, the blooms and colors, well, the possibilities are endless. The whole process is a mind-boggling experience. However, I've always found if you look at designing a garden in the same way a painter creates a beautiful painting, the process begins to make a whole lot more sense. To gain a better perspective on the similarities of art and gardening, I set up my easel alongside veteran Plein Aire painters Sandra Bradford and Jeff Smith. So Jeff, what is the history of plein air painting? How did this get started?
Plein air painting started, I believe, with the French Impressionists. The term plein air is actually French. It means in the open air, to paint out in the open air.
Right.
In the French Impressionists, Monet, Renoir, painters of that period, began to go outdoors and paint. And so it was a very revolutionary way of working. Before that, painters had gone outdoors, but they primarily worked outdoors doing studies. But the Impressionists were really the first to go out and do a complete finished work, and these outdoor paintings would be finished pieces in their own right.
So Sandra, do you feel like plein air painting is a more honest way to paint?
Oh, absolutely. You're painting directly from nature. The camera only sees a certain way, so by using a photograph, you don't really capture the atmosphere and the mood that you can painting directly from nature.
I know using the blackboard with the cutout, roughly the size of the proportion of the canvas, really helps to isolate and go back to the image you've chosen.
Right, the viewfinder. It's a very practical tool. It helps you frame your picture and establish your composition right away. It isolates what you're looking at.
Right.
It almost gives you an instant composition.
I think if more of us looking at our gardens would take that approach, we'd be less frustrated.
Establishing a structure, a framework, is the most important thing. If you establish that framework right off the bat, you'll find you'll need very little detail to finish the picture.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to jump into the detail first.
That's right.
And it really it doesn't work very well that way. I mean, even particularly designing a garden, you have to work out all the large areas first before you get to the flowers. You have to lay out the patios, the terraces,
Right.
the walks and so forth before you get to the actual flower planting, which is what everybody wants to do.
Right.
Cinder, you came to designing gardens through painting, didn't you?
I did. I actually started to do it as a practical ways to make a living, and really found that I was able to use my creative ability to not only to draw designs, but to actually put flowers together. I was never very good at remembering all the plant names. But,
You know, I find it so much easier to limit the palette I'm working with to just a few colors, whether it's painting or designing a garden, by using just a few flowers of the same color family. It really makes more impact.
yeah, I have to agree. I mean, there's something about when you first go into a nursery and you're hit by all these rows and rows of colorful plants, and you think, well, I'd like to have all of that.
Right. Well,
It works the same way in painting. You go in and you find these rows and rows of pre-mixed colors, and you're just like, hey, I'd love to have that. But what happens when you end up putting it on your palette, you end up with too many different things going on in your painting. It's best to start out with one overall color.
Yeah, what I've done is I've picked a point in the garden that interests me the most, a simple thing, and I've established my colors for the whole painting, my big areas, my framework, and I'm really interested in that light on that fountain, so I've moved into that area to define that a bit more. That's going to be my center of interest. I would imagine in gardening it works much the same way. Establish a center of interest,
yeah, I think it
and then
helps.
frame around that, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. You want a focal point. You want something that the eye immediately goes toward. It could be a path, a bench, an urn, a fountain, a beautiful tree.
So a lot of the same principles apply to both painting and designing of a garden.
Next, I'll show you how to spruce up your garden with a splash of color. Each spring, when I begin to think of container planting, I always think of the months ahead. What's this container going to look like throughout the summer and into the fall? For this container, I want something that can take the blistering heat of summer and remain beautiful right up until the first cold nights of autumn. Now, this time of year, you can find all sorts of inspiration for containers. In fact, I was inspired by some dahlias that I found in this mail order catalog. The variety I'm using is one called Zingaro. It's a medium height dahlia that only grows to about 24 inches. Dahlias are excellent for growing in containers, but I've also enjoyed growing them in my garden for years. The range of color and bloom shape is really fantastic. One of my favorite dinner plate dahlias is one called Otto's Thrill. One of the fascinating things about dahlias is they actually grow from a tuber like this, which is not unlike a potato. In fact, dahlia tubers are actually edible. Now, I'm using these in a cluster of 3 toward the back of the container like this. And to complement the dahlias, I'm using some other brightly colored sun-loving plants. To grow alongside the dahlia, I've planted some of this festive colored coleus, and to cascade down the container, I'm using this sweet potato vine called Blackie, along with a verbena and this silver-leafed helichrysum. I think the thing to keep in mind in creating a container like this is to have an anchoring centerpiece, like the dahlias. These will soon grow and fill this part of the container, and use plants that work in the same color family. Now, if you'd like more ideas on classic combinations for containers, just check out our website. That's pallensmith.com. As we've seen in today's show, a lot of artwork and inspiration for artists comes directly from nature itself. We've seen the seascapes of the Plein Aire Painters, Kate Nessler's meticulous botanical illustration, and the Bentwood Trellises of Jim Long, who all look to nature for their inspiration. Of course, by the same token, gardens are influenced by great works of art. You see, it's just a never-ending cycle. I hope you've enjoyed our look today at the similarities between gardening and art, and I hope you'll soon be working on your next masterpiece, whether it's a garden or a work of art. From the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.